Hello everyone, welcome back. I hope your day is starting off great. Let me introduce this video with the backdrop here, a picture snapped by Francine from Montreal, Quebec. A beautiful scene of the leaves just starting to change. Fall is upon us and the beautiful colors are coming out. And I just thought maybe it'd be a good idea to contact our artist who lives in Nanaimo, who designed the I Choose Canada shirt, the first one, and maybe come up with a fall version of that shirt. I think that would be a good idea. Potentially the most important news story for Canada might be in the headlines tomorrow as Mark Carney and Donald Trump meet in the White House. This is a meeting that was just announced on Friday, and it comes as a bit of a surprise. And there's rumors circulating that perhaps there'll be a major announcement made. And I'm interested in hearing your thoughts in the comment section of what potentially could be announced, if anything, tomorrow. But before you leave your comment, let me paint a picture for you. The economic background that engulfs our two nations as our two leaders meet in Washington. Now, the announcement of the meeting came as a little bit of a surprise, and it's reported here on CNN, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney to meet with Trump next week at the White House. And from the American media's point of view, this is what they wrote. Canada announced Friday that Prime Minister Mark Carney is heading to Washington next week to meet with US President Donald Trump for what is being billed as a working visit. While a statement from the Prime Minister's office said the visit on Tuesday will focus on shared priorities in the new economic and security relationship between Canada and the United States. Will there be an announcement made on some sort of an agreement involving economics and security? Now, in the lead up to this meeting, last week, there was terrible economic news released in the United States. The headline again from CNN, the US economy lost 32,000 private sector jobs in September. And not only were those numbers very bad, the US private sector businesses lost 32,000 jobs in September, according to the report. But August's previous estimate of 54,000 payroll gains were downwardly revised to a negative 3,000. And with that negative revision, it really solidifies the trend that's going on in the United States. Just job losses are increasing. The article goes on to mention that the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the US is unlikely to release the monthly jobs report this Friday, due to the government shutdown. So we probably won't get any new numbers on US employment, just these numbers that specifically talk about private sector jobs. And the trend is going down. Add to this that there's many economists in the United States, including Moody's chief economist, and the headline here is US economy on the brink of recession. The US economy is very close to a recession based on data about spending, jobs, and manufacturing, he said, adding that he is worried about US tariffs hurting American companies. Of course, US tariffs are hurting American companies because US companies are the ones that pay the tariffs, and they're paying those tariffs on everything they import, including Canadian aluminum and Canadian steel, which they import to use to manufacture things. And a survey of top Canadian economists conclude that the headline is Canada to avoid recession, but economy still bruised by tariffs. And this was reported on Bloomberg. Canada's economy is poised for a weak recovery in the second half of 2025 as exports stage a gradual rebound from tariff damage, analysts said. Gross domestic product will grow at a 0.5% annualized pace in the third quarter, according to Bloomberg's survey of economists. That's up from 0.1% expected in last month's survey and follows a 1.6% contraction in the second quarter. These numbers point to avoiding a recession, but they're not very good numbers. So with that backdrop, you have to ask yourself, well, why is Mark Carney going to Washington? And why was the meeting only announced on Friday? There's really no reason to engage one-on-one, leader to leader, unless perhaps they had something to announce, that what negotiations that were going on in the background have made some progress, and there's something that the two of them want to announce. Now, with the dismal job numbers that are coming out monthly in the United States, I think Donald Trump probably is looking for a win. And he may have let some information about the meeting slip out in his address he gave to his military commanders in Virginia just a few days ago when he was talking about the Iron Dome, and it looked like he was off script and he just said, Canada called and they're really interested in the Iron Dome. And I told him, well, you could have it for free if you become the 51st state. He blurted that out, But when you sift through the BS, which usually engulfs the truths, the little kernels of truths that are in his comments, perhaps there was contact between Canada and the United States to set up this meeting, and maybe it had something to do with our security partnership and possibly something to do with our economic partnership. So let me throw out my thoughts here and some ideas, just speculation. Number one, I don't think our Prime Minister would go down there and meet one-on-one unscripted. I don't think that could really amount to anything positive or anything good for him politically. I think the only reason that our leader, and I'm talking our leader as opposed to background negotiations, there's been a lot of negotiations and representatives from both countries in discussions over the months. But the only reason for a leader-to-leader meeting would be if those background negotiations actually amounted to something. Could there be a deal announced, or at least some agreement on a few things? That's a possibility. So here are some ideas. Now, Donald Trump needs an out from some of the crippling tariffs that he's imposed on imports. And one of the most crippling is the tariffs on steel and aluminum from Canada. It's affecting their manufacturing sector, and they're losing jobs in the United States. But Donald Trump's not going to come out and say, the tariffs were a mistake. I'm going to lower those tariffs because we're losing jobs and it's affecting our manufacturing sector. He's not going to say that. He has to come out of it with a win. He has to present whatever announcement he makes as a big win for the United States and a big cave for Canada. So it's possible that there might be some announcement that the US is lowering those tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, maybe some other sectors, maybe not to zero, but lowering them somewhat. And in return, Canada has agreed to something involving the security relationship between the two countries, maybe something involving this Golden Dome idea, maybe agreeing to work with the United States as they further that plan, because any plan of a Golden Dome North American defense system, for it to proceed in the way it's been described, would have to have some involvement from Canada, some way. Otherwise, they would be looking at two little domes, a little dome over Alaska and a little dome over the United States. If they want one big dome, Canada has to be involved somehow, and potentially even Greenland. So was that the little bit of information that Donald Trump let slip in this speech to his generals? Let me play the clip for you so you can hear it for yourself exactly what he said.
And we've begun construction on what we call the Golden Dome missile defense shield. It'll be the most sophisticated in the world. You watched it do well. But I tell you, it's what we're doing is so good, and we deserve it. You know, we help other countries with it. We don't have it ourselves. And Canada called me a couple of weeks ago. They want to be part of it. To which I said, well, why don't you just join our country? You become 51, become the 51st state, and you get it for free. So I don't know if that made a big impact, but it does make a lot of sense. It actually makes, because they're having a hard time up there in Canada now.
So of course he couldn't help himself, and he injects the rhetoric about Canada should become the 51st state. Let's just leave that aside for now. So that's one possibility, and I think that's probably the most likely because Donald Trump actually mentioned it. It was in his head. He said Canada called. So, you know, the facts are bouncing around in his small brain there, and a few of them came out. Along with a mess of nonsense, but it was in there. We know that. The other possibility is maybe there's an announcement on some sort of cooperation in our auto sector. The tariffs that are in place now are really not healthy for the cross-border back and forth trade in auto parts and auto manufacturing. And I know that a lot of the auto executives have made that case to Donald Trump. Perhaps those might be reduced. The question is, if any of these tariffs are reduced, what is Canada giving in return? We just mentioned and discussed possible cooperation in the Golden Dome plan. Another U.S.-Canada security matter that's been under discussion, a big one, is the F-35 purchase, and Canada looking for alternatives to maybe replace our order for the F-35s. Canada is considering canceling that F-35 fighter jet order, and we're considering buying a plane from a Swedish company instead. And I always said that could be a negotiating tactic, a stick that Canada has. Maybe we're going to give a little bit on that file. We've committed to 16 out of the 88 planes, I believe. Maybe Canada's ready to commit to 16 more, or a portion of that contract. commit to it in exchange for a reduction in aluminum and steel tariffs, the very materials that the United States would need to manufacture those things. There's a lot of different possibilities. It's going to be very interesting what comes out of the meeting. And I'm interested in your comments and guesses as to what could happen, what might be announced, if anything would be announced at all. Although, remember, I don't think there's any possibility that Mark Carney goes down there and they have a meeting and they just sit in the Oval Office for a photo op without anything to announce. There's going to be some sort of an announcement. Now, this video would not be complete unless I mention what the opposition leader's reaction is to this, what Pierre Poilievre has to say. Let's just post this up here for you. Hoping Prime Minister Carney will keep his promise and negotiate a win with President Trump to end the U.S. tariffs in their Tuesday meeting. He promised. Daddy, he promised he would end the tariffs. I hope he keeps his promise. What are you, 11 years old, Pierre? He promised, Daddy. He promised that he would end the tariffs. I hope he keeps his promise. Nobody promised an end to the tariffs, you buffoon. This is Donald Trump we're dealing with. Do you think anyone can promise what Donald Trump will do? In fact, it's the opposite. Our Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has said from the beginning, our relationship with the United States, as it has been for hundreds of years, is over. Don't expect anything to happen as you might have expected it to happen in the past. Nobody can control what Donald Trump decides. And the only comment that Pierre has ever made about Donald Trump was during the election campaign when he tweeted, "Donald Trump, knock it off." Maybe that strategy would have worked and we should have elected you, Pierre. And then Donald Trump, while he was having his speech with his military leaders, he could have said something like, "Canada called and they told me to knock it off. And so I've decided to remove all tariffs." And then you could say, see, I promised I'd have all the tariffs removed and I told Donald Trump to knock it off and he removed all the tariffs. What are you, like 8 years old? And then he goes on to say the same thing that he's ever said about any issue he's ever discussed. I think it's just a copy paste. He says, U.S. tariffs have doubled since Mark Carney took office. U.S. tariffs on Canadian imports haven't doubled since Mark Carney took office. What happened was there were no U.S. tariffs on Canadian imports. We had a free trade agreement, and then Donald Trump got elected, and now there are. It wasn't the Canadian government that instructed Washington to impose tariffs on imports from Canada. Like, who listens to this gibberish? Like, what kind of strategy is this, or how is this helpful? I'm probably going to have to stop reading any of the comments that this guy makes because they're just so pathetically infuriating. What's the most infuriating to me is knowing that some people representing the conservative base will read things like this and they'll get energized from it. They'll think, well, yeah, he's right. This is our guy. This is who we need to represent us. Can you even imagine the situation we'd be in if this guy were the prime minister? Would he be tweeting these kind of things directed towards Donald Trump now? Would they be going after each other? What kind of condition would the Canada and United States relationship be in if Pierre Poilievre was the prime minister? It's just shocking, but I had to include it in this video. More of the same, and you conservatives, you have a chance to ditch this guy and get someone more positive, someone that has more vision and more ideas, who can work with others, and you could potentially choose another leader and redefine your party as a party that can govern nationally rather than just be led by a guy who spews doom and gloom and uses the same slogans. Let's see what his next tweet is. I'll partially write it for him. Blank has doubled since Mark Carney took power. How come his elbows aren't up? Why are his elbows down? Now you insert whatever you want in the blank, and that'll be his next tweet. Leave some comments in the comment section. Let me know what you think is possible as an announcement. I really think that there will be, let's call it a major announcement. Probably not a full deal. Donald Trump will say, we made a deal. This is another great deal for the United States. Canada caved and we made a fantastic deal. That will be what Donald Trump says. But it's not really going to be a deal. It'll probably be an announcement on some sort of an agreement, some sort of a framework of an agreement, something that the two countries and the two leaders feel is substantial enough to get these two guys together to have a photo op. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you are enjoying the content. Consider becoming a channel member if you want to support my work monthly. Have a fantastic rest of your day, And I will catch you all on the next one. And yes, I will follow up after the real announcements are made tomorrow.